Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to America once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel once before. Now, the last beer that I reviewed from these guys appeared on the channel only a couple of weeks ago, and I was really impressed with that one. It was a lovely smoothie sour, and that is one of the styles that this brewery is apparently renowned for, and based on that one, I can see why. But for this review today, we are going to have a look at a beer from the other style category that this brewery is particularly renowned for. I'm not sure exactly what kind of sub-style this one's going to fit into, but I have heard very, very good things about this beer. It also seems to be really highly rated on Untappd, and yeah, I'm just really looking forward to trying this one. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious about this beer. Hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, like I said, we are heading over to the US. We're going to go to the state of Ohio in the American Midwest. We're going to go to the kind of center of the state and a little bit to the northeast of Columbus to a little town called Newark, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Dankhouse Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Super Duper Fantastic. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is a double IPA. So yeah, as I said, I'm not 100% sure exactly what kind of IPA this one is going to be. It was listed on Untappd simply as double IPA, but we'll just need to see. It was listed on Untappd too, as well as being 8.4% ABV, although it just says 8% on the can. But it's got a classic hop profile in it, and I think that will be very, very nice. But yeah, Dankhouse Brewing Company are very well known for their kind of big, fruity, juicy, modern, whatever you're going to call it, sour beers, and their IPAs are also supposed to be pretty damn good as well. And that was the main motivation behind getting this one. I think I picked this one up at Wine Rack in Chinsatue here in Hong Kong. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. Really looking forward to this. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Dankhouse Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlists of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist along with a number of other things. That's being added to quite regular at the moment because we do seem to get a bunch of random stuff from America here in Hong Kong, which I am not complaining about. It's great, but do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Dankhouse Brewing Company then. So, Dankhouse Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Newark in Ohio, which is kind of to the northeast-ish of Columbus, and the company was founded back in 2017 by Josh and Heather Lange. So both of these guys are Newark locals, and Josh worked in construction while Heather was an elementary school teacher. But the two apparently knew each other in high school, but didn't really hang out together from what it said, but they started dating in Phoenix, where Heather had studied and was teaching, and this came about after Josh was sent there on a work trip and he just looked her up. But they stayed in Phoenix for a good couple of years, and then they moved back home to be closer to their families. So apparently they initially had the plan to open up a carry-out craft beer shop, and they sorted out all of the licenses and the other paperwork, and they were just waiting for the lease when the anchor store of the kind of centre that they were going to open up in squashed the whole project. So this setback apparently was what triggered them to start learning about how to brew beer, and they started their home brewing activities back in about 2015, brewing at home in their garage. So Josh quit his job to focus on building up the company, and the renovation of the site was quite time consuming as well, but you know, he came from the ideal background. But the brewery would eventually open its doors in November of 2017. So the brewery itself is based on an 8.5 acre site. They've got an indoor area for the kids to play and lots of space outside to play things like beer pong and other games and stuff like that. If you look at pictures of their brewery, it's actually quite interesting. It's really kid friendly and, you know, big kid friendly as well, I guess you could say. But the brewery started off with a 2.5 US barrel kit. That's about 320 litres for those of us who use the metric and proper measuring system. And they also had 5 US barrel fermenters, which is around 550 litres. But this has since been upgraded to a 10 BBL system, which is around 1600 litres per brew. And they've also added other things to the brewery infrastructure as time has gone on as well, obviously canning lines and stuff like this. But the brewery built a very strong reputation very quickly, and they became particularly well known for their sour beers and for their hazy IPAs. And as of June 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 320 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that number will no doubt continue to increase. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Dankhouse Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a wee bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But for me, definitely cool to try some more beers from Ohio, because I've heard it's a very good beer state. But other than, like Hop and Frog, I don't think we really see too much outside of, in Europe or in Asia from the state of Ohio. So it's nice to see their beers starting to get out there a little bit. And I think I had a comment on the last Dankhouse video listing a bunch of breweries that I should check out. So we need to see if we can make some reviews of those happen at some point in the future. But yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So as you can see, we've once again got this very distinctive style of artwork from Dankhouse. I really do like it there. It's almost like, kind of reminds me a little bit of Mr. T if he ingested some kind of nuclear material or something like that. But yeah, the artwork here is really nice. This is a One American pint can, incidentally, 473 millilitres. Plain black top on it. As I said earlier, this one is 8% ABV, although Untappd lists it as being 8.4% ABV. We know it's an IPA, not exactly what kind of IPA it's going to be, but this one has some proper old school hops in it. Amarillo, Mosaic and Simcoe. All three of these are American. Amarillo is about 12% alpha acid. It's going to give you that big, zesty, oily orange character. Mosaic is 14% alpha acid. It's going to give you a little bit of distinctive earthiness, but also quite a bright tangerine note. And Simcoe is going to give you some kind of passion fruit. It's 12% alpha acid as well. Just kind of depends. Simcoe can behave quite differently depending on what your malt base is. So yeah, super duper fantastic, 8% double IPA. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. Oh yeah, there we go. Looking forward to this. I'm very curious to see what kind of IPA this one is going to be. Let's just sugar it up a wee bit in case there was some sediment there. This glass can take a full American pint, incidentally, so we'll see. It does seem to have a little bit, has hazed up a little bit since we've put a wee bit more into the glass there, but I think for the moment that's enough to have a look at the appearance of the beer. So before the head starts to recede, you can see that the beer's poured with about a finger of a frothy, I would say, is that perfect white? Maybe very, very slightly creamy coloured head there. You can see some small medium-sized bubbles on the surface of the liquid there, but the beer gets a little bit more kind of foamy the further up the head that you go, but there are some kind of air gaps and stuff in there. But the head looks really nice, and it seems to be retaining fairly well, actually. But yeah, colour-wise, this beer is a lovely, bright sort of mango juice colour, I would say. I always like comparing kind of IPAs to different fruit juices because their appearance just reminds me of that. But yeah, this one, I think we can say it's either going to be one of these kind of generic American IPAs, which are somewhere between the West Coast and New England IPAs, or it's going to be, a less soupy and gloopy New England IPA, I would say. Yeah, if it is a New England IPA, it's certainly not the soupiest and gloopiest. And remember, with New England IPAs, well, the key differences between these styles: West Coast IPAs tend to use mainly barley malt in their malt base. New England IPAs use quite a little bit of barley malt, but also a good little bit of wheat and oat in there as well. And there's difference in the hoppings as well. West Coast IPAs tend to be a little bit more bitter because of the use of early addition hopping as well as late addition and dry hopping, whereas New Englands are a little bit softer and more juicy and things, because they ride primarily on late addition and dry hopping, which doesn't give you the bitterness. So yeah, this one for me, I'm curious to see exactly where on the IPA spectrum it'll lie. But yeah, you can see the beer has a little bit of natural haziness to it. In America, they don't tend to list the ingredients of beer, whereas in Europe and the EU they have to by law. But yeah, I'm guessing the haziness in this one is due to the presence of some oat and wheat. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour beer. But any barrel agent that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour too, but you don't really have to care about that very often when it comes to the IPA style category. But yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation in this one. You can see the head has left some nice lacing on the glass, but that has just faded away to be a kind of thin foamy layer, of course. But all in all, nothing really unusual about the appearance of this beer when you consider what style it is. So let's have a wee look at the nose then and see what this one has in store for us. Aroma section time. Ooh, yeah. This is kind of interesting. I think this one, it's either going to be a more farmhousey and yeasty New England hazy, or it's going to be one of these kind of American IPAs that's somewhere between the West Coast and New England. Because the first impression I get out of this one is that it actually has a little bit of that more farmhousey, yeasty character that you'll find with the likes of Alchemists from, I forget if they're New Hampshire or Vermont. I think it's Vermont. But yeah, it has a little bit of that nice farmhousey, yeasty character. You've got a big, really bright green component in this one. Lovely big fruity notes in there. But yeah, there's a good wee bit of malt base as well. It's giving you everything you'd expect of the style, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, this is either going to be American or more New England hazy, to be honest with you. So we'll be able to tell when we taste the thing, of course. But aroma-wise, this is great. So let's just break that down. The backbone of this beer, you've got that lovely kind of fresh, white bready bread crust coming out of this one. So there's a teeny little bit of woodiness in there. There's quite a lot of cracker for me, and the presence of that cracker is what makes me think that this beer is a little bit more kind of yeasty leaning. And it is a little bit more kind of yeasty leaning in its nature, if you like. So yeah, nice little bit of crackery note in this one, good little bit of woody character, fresh kind of hedgehog white bready bread crust in there. I'm getting a good little bit of like wholemeal brown bready character from this one as well, a slightly drier wholemeal brown bread. You also have to remember that malts from different countries are slightly different. American barley malt for me is a little bit more sweet and oily, whereas the European malts are a bit more crisp. It's the same with the wheat, of course. The American wheat is a little bit kind of smoother, I would say. European oats are a bit more creamy, whereas American oats are a little bit more porridgey, I would say. But yeah, definitely a good little bit of kind of drier brown bready character, and there quite a lot of white bready character as well. The white bready note is a little bit sweeter for sure. You can smell some wheat in this one as well, and the wheaty character has a little bit of bite at the back of the nose, but other than that it's very smooth. As I say, American wheat tends to be like smoother in my experience compared with European wheat. Different water profiles, different soil profiles and all that jazz, even different species of wheat of course as well. And on top of that, there is definitely some oaty character in this one. So the oats, you do get a nice little bit of creaminess out of them, but you can smell just that little hint of kind of porridgey character as well, just like mushy oaty character, which I do really quite like in this one. But yeah, definitely the thing that's standing out to me about the malt base and the kind of yeasty character in this one is just that slightly farmhousey, rusticy, bready note that this beer has, the kind of cracker and the woody background as well. Within that malt base, you do get a nice little bit of sweet caramel. I do get a little bit of straight up caramel in this one, but there's also a more kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch type note. Wee bit of biscuit as well, McVitie's digestive biscuit. To the Americans, of course, watching, that'll be cookie for you guys. But yeah, there's a little bit of all of that going on in there, but the malty character in this one is really, really nice. So yeah, this is going to be good, you can tell. So In terms of the green component in this one, the more that I smell of this beer, the more that it has a little bit of a kind of deeper, dank character. So remember, with IPAs you have 3 types of hopping. Early addition hopping, which takes place within the first hour of the wort boil, that gives you a lot of bitterness and a deep, dank aroma. Late addition hopping, which takes place within the last half hour of the wort boil, that gives you a wee bit of bitterness, a lot of flavour and aroma, and a really nice kind of bright green component as well. And then dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, that's all about flavour and aroma, and it gives you a very bright green component. Hazy IPAs, of course, rely on late addition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs use all 3, which is why they have the bigger bitterness. This beer, though, I do suspect this is going to be like a generic American IPA, to be honest with you. But yeah, this beer does have a little bit of that early addition hopping. You can smell that deep, dank character, and all 3 of the hops involved in this one are certainly capable of giving you that. So there is a little touch of earthiness in there, which I would say is probably from the mosaic. You can smell that at the back of the nose for sure. But yeah, you've got a big floral aromatic character coming out of this one, which I think is very, very nice. So big, zesty, kind of floral aromaticity to the beer. You've got a nice kind of zesty, grassy character coming out of it as well, which I think is very, very nice. And then it's all about the fruity notes of the beer. So yeah, green component in this one is kind of as you would expect. So yeah, the fruity side of this one then, you can certainly, it's almost like the Simcoe is kind of being the anchor of this beer. You do get that softer, juicier, passion fruity, sort of almost apricot-y side of Simcoe coming out. Simcoe, of course, can be really oily, actually, if you use it in a more West Coast IPA malt base, but it's very, very soft and juicy in a more New England malt base, such as this one. But yeah, this beer really, really leans toward the bigger kind of orangey characteristics, and when you've got Amarillo and Mosaic in there, that's to be expected. So yeah, you can certainly smell with this beer, it does have a little touch of a peachy sharpness. So yeah, there's a little bit of peach, big soft passion fruit in there, and then a wee bit of the apricot-y character. But then yeah, it's all about the orange after this. You've got that big zesty oily orange from the Amarillo in this one, and you can smell the slightly brighter tangerine from the Mosaic in this one. I almost want to say there's like a little touch of like melon or something in here as well. But yeah, the aroma of this beer is very, very interesting, and it's a bit different, this one, compared to a number of other IPAs that I've had in recent times, and that's what you want after you've reviewed like 4,000 odd beers. You want beers that are going to test your nose and test your palate a little bit. So let's get the rest of this guy out and into the glass and see how we get on. As I always say, take a bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see what it's all about. So this one is the Super Duper Fantastic, an 8% double IPA from Dankhouse Brewing Company in Newark, Ohio, over in the US. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty nice. I'm going to say straight away, this beer is more like a kind of generic American IPA. I would say that it's definitely somewhere in between the West Coast and the New England for me. Yeah, and it's interesting, as I say, it's interesting to have something like this. I have seen a couple of beers that have been called mountain IPAs, or Colorado IPAs. This one kind of reminds me of that, and it's almost fitting, if you like, that these guys are from Ohio, which is about halfway across the country. It's maybe a bit less than halfway between California and the New England region. So yeah, it's kind of fitting that this beer is somewhere in the middle, if you like. But yeah, it certainly has a little bit of the kind of hoppy green component character of the West Coast. It has a little bit of the sweetness of the West Coast IPA as well, but the malty character is a bit more like New England farmhousey, and the fruity character is kind of somewhere in the middle of the two. actually. So it's a really interesting beer, this one, but the first question should always be, is it good? And the answer is definitely yes. This one actually does remind me a little bit of the beers from Alchemist in Vermont. As I say, the aroma kind of just gave me that, but the flavour does as well. It reminds me a wee bit of, what's it? Is it Lawson's Finest Liquids? It reminds me a little bit of their beers as well, actually. So yeah, this is, in some ways, you maybe could argue that this one is very much like some of the very old school New England IPAs that were first produced in New England itself. You know, the style that is adopted by a lot of European and Asian breweries these days is the one that's a little bit more of a mix-up of, you know, Trillium and Treehouse, the more wheaty or the more oaty, creamy leaning New England IPAs, but the more old school farmhouse ones, such as Alchemist, Lawson's Finest Liquids and stuff like that, that's particular branch of the New England IPA I don't think is really spread over there. So this beer is really interesting from that perspective. You maybe could argue that it's more of a New England hazy, but with a more farmhousey character, such as those breweries that I mentioned. But it's good, as I say, that's the main thing. Let's break the flavour of this beer down though and just describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So yeah, for me, the backbone of this beer, if you go to that middle third of your palate, you can feel the backbone of your beer is that lovely, smooth, it's more like a kind of brown bready, slightly toasty, bread crusty character there. So that lingers, that is the bottom, the baseline of your beer. If you go forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little touch of woody character in there, and that lingers into the aftertaste too. But above that, you've got a really nice crackery note coming out of this one. So yeah, lovely big sort of crackery character to this beer, which again lingers into the aftertaste. But above the cracker, you've got a more wholemeal, brown bready sort of note coming out of this beer. And the brown bready character is, you know, kind of like wholemeal brown bread, and that, as I say, kind of contributes to the sort of slightly farmhousey nature of this beer. Above that brown bready layer, then yeah, you start to get the white bready character, and again the bready character in this one, it's not overly sweet. The aroma gave the impression that the bready characters, the barley malt bready characters, would be that little bit sweeter, but not really. And the brown bread and the white bread kind of merged together almost. So yeah. Yeah, I do like that about this beer actually. So above that, you start to get the wheaty character coming out of the beer, and the wheat in this one is quite interesting because it does feel a little bit more bitey, almost. Which, as I say, you know, American wheat for me was always just that little bit more smooth, based on the beers that I tried in New England in the summer. So yeah, you do get this little bit of an almost kind of more spicy, bitey, wheaty character. There's a more dense, spicy, bitey, white bready character sitting above the barley malt, and then above all of that, you have more of a you have an oaty character coming out of the beer. So yeah, you've got that lovely smooth oaty creaminess in there. As you go down the middle line of your palate, you've got you can feel that more creamy, dense oaty character, but as you move out toward the edge of the middle third of your palate, you just get that little bit more dryness. And as I've often said in New England reviews on the channel before, the oaty character in beer is usually quite a good indicator of how fresh your IPA is. Essentially, the fresher your New England IPA is, the creamier the oats are, the older is, the drier they are. But yeah, in this dead centre of your palate, there's a little circle there where you get a wee bit of a kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type note out of the beer. There maybe in the dead centre there's a little bit of straight up caramel, and as you go a wee bit further out from that, more of a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing, and you also have that little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity type character coming out of it. So yeah, the malty base in the middle third of your palate, and this one is quite nice. So let's look at the back third of the palate then. Remember, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. The border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there, the kind of brown bread in the base, the white bread on top of that, then that little bit of wheaty bitey character there. But yeah, the base of that back third of your palate, you've got more of a kind of brown bready sort of thing in there. So yeah, you've got that brown bready bread crust. On top of that, you've got a wee bit of like cracker as well. Then you've got a more wholemeal brown bready kind of character sitting on top of that, and you can feel that that layer is slightly taller and lighter and more airy. Then you've got the white bready character in there, again taller, lighter and more airy, and then above that you get the more kind of wheaty, bitey sort of note coming out of the beer. So yeah, the way that all of that pieces together, I think, is really quite nice. So yeah, on top of everything else, you have the yeasty character coming out of the beer, and as I say, that's where I think this beer is really quite interesting. So the taste side of the yeast is interesting, because that yeasty character there in the dead centre of it, you can feel there's a more grainy, wholemeal, brown bready character there. As you go further out from that, it gives you a little bit of a lighter kind of brown bready character, and then the more kind of the edge of that yeasty character is a little bit more like wheaty and bitey. It's almost got a very slight peppery spice to it as well. So yeah, there is a wee bit of a kind of spicy, grainy character coming out of the yeasty side of this beer, but it's really interesting in that regard too. And all of that, as I say, sits on top of the back third of your palate. So yeah, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But yeah, the way that the malty and yeasty character goes out and comes out in this beer is really quite nice. So yeah, onto the green component then. Just from the impression that I have of the green component, I think there's definitely a wee bit of early edition hopping going on in this one. So for me, yeah, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness coming out of this one. So yeah, you can feel that in there. That's the mosaic that's going to give you that. But yeah, as you move further forward along the sides of your palate there, you do get a wee bit of that deeper, danker, piney resin, which all three of these hops can give you. And then as you reach the kind of front corners of your palate, you've got a more spicy, floral aromatic note out of this one. If I didn't, if I would have guessed actually there was maybe a little touch of Columbus in this beer, but they don't have that listed, of course. But round the front curve of the tongue, you've got a little bit of a lighter, more grassy kind of note out of this one. It's got a little bit of zestiness to it, which I find quite interesting. But yeah, the way that all of that pieces together, I think, is really nice. The green component in this one does have a little bit more of that West Coasty type character to it. So yeah, interesting stuff. Let's look at the front third of your palate then and the fruity side of the beer. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer, it's not kind of soft and juicy in the same way that a New England is. It does have a wee bit more of, it does have a wee bit more of kind of oiliness to it. I just was wondering when this was canned. This was canned on the 16th of January 2024. So we're actually drinking this beer just shy of 6 months old at the time of filming, but it has held up pretty well, I would say. So yeah, interesting stuff. But and I think it has been in the fridge pretty much all the time. It has been cold chained all the way over here. So yeah, still in good position. As I say, just a little bit more of a kind of farmhousey character to it. But yeah, front third of your palate then, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, you get a little bit of that bready build up in there, a wee bit of brown bread in the base, the white bread on top, and a wee bit of wheaty bitiness there. But the base of that front third of your palate, it's got a little bit more, as I say, it's got a little bit more of that brown bready bread crust in there, the cracker, the brown bread, the white bread. You can feel the wheat in there as well, it's quite smooth. And then above that, you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just kind of roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the way all of that goes together, I think, is quite nice. Let's look at that fruity bubble then and just describe the fruity side of the beer. yeah, it's kind of what you'd expect from these hops, in all honesty. You've got that lovely kind of slightly oily, passion fruity note coming out of this one, but it does mellow out and become a little bit softer the further you go into the aftertaste. There's a wee touch of apricot in the, there's a little bit of apricot as you reach the kind of middle of that front third of your palate, and then as you push toward the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, it's all about the orange. I think you can feel the softer, I think you can feel the kind of mosaic, this kind of softer but brighter tangerine there in the base, and then above that you're getting the more oily, zesty orange from the Amarillo. So I think the beer does definitely get a little bit more orangey into the aftertaste. I don't know if it's a 33 ratio of these three hops, or if one of them dominates or whatever, but it does get more and more orangey, this beer, the more that you drink of it. So I like the way this one goes together. It's a big thumbs up from me. I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour. Let's just round off the review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So, mouthfeel wise, this beer for me, it's I would say it's kind of, it's mid-bodied. It's right in the middle of the spectrum. It's quite light and drinkable actually for a big 8%. That's one of the things I would say about it. Mid-bodied, right in the middle of the spectrum. The carbonation does have a little bit of a prickle to it in this one, but the beer is overall quite smooth. As I say, it's got a little bit of that kind of yeasty, farmhousey dryness to it as well, which I find quite interesting. IBU wise, I think this beer is maybe around 50 or 60 IBUs. That bitterness does linger there into the aftertaste. You've got a good little bit of dryness and graininess underneath in the malt base. You've got the smoothness in the middle of that as well, then a kind of more dense, slightly creamy kind of character coming out of it above that, and then you've got a wee touch of sweetness there, and the fruity side of this one is more kind of zesty and oily, but not too oily, I would say. But all in all, a really, really interesting double IPA. This one, very good quality for sure, but it reminds me of the more old school New England hazy IPAs from the likes of Alchemist and things like that. Either that, or it's more kind of a generic American IPA. Actually, I'd love to hear what they kind of, what the brewery themselves kind of say about this one in terms of the stylistic interpretations. But we can try and put boxes and categories all day. The question should be, is it good? This one, absolutely. This is very, very nice. So let's leave it on that note. So this one was the Super Duper Fantastic. Did I say that right? It is Super Duper Fantastic. So I thought it was going to be Super Duper Fabulous just for a second there. But an 8% double IPA from Dankhouse Brewing in Newark, Ohio, in the American Midwest. So until the next time, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Dankhouse Brewing Company, and we will see about returning to these guys again at some point in the very near future. The Stay Puffed Sour Beer series is also very, very good, so hopefully we get more of those. But until the next time, slàinte, skål, cheers, and I'll catch you in the next review. Ciao just now.